There's a moment where something in you responds directly, and then there's a moment when that response is worked over. Once that process begins, the original response is still there, but it's no longer the only thing present. When they're not distinguished, they begin to blend. It can feel like confusion. But what's actually happening is that different kinds of information are being experienced as one. Bring to mind something that's been with you recently. It might be practical, where you're living, the work you're doing, how you're spending your time, or relational, a shift in how you feel about someone, a change in how you want to be in a relationship, a sense that something is no longer aligned the way it used to be. You don't need to define it precisely. Let the general shape of it be present. Within that, see if you can remember a moment when you had a response. You may have recognized that as intuition, or questioned it immediately. What matters here is not what it meant, and not whether it was right, only that it happened, and that it was followed almost immediately by something else. After that initial response, something else begins to move. You begin to understand what just happened, to place it, to evaluate it. You might find yourself asking, is this actually intuition? Am I reacting to something else? Is this clarity or frustration? Is this real or the result of being tired or overwhelmed? As those questions begin to move, the original response is still there, but it's no longer separate. It's part of a larger field of thought. At that point, something subtle has shifted. You're no longer with the original perception. You're with your interpretation of it. That shift happens quickly, so quickly it doesn't register as a change. It feels like thinking something through, but there's a difference between something that registers immediately and something constructed in response to it. When those aren't distinguished, they begin to blend. And once they're blended, it becomes difficult to tell them apart. You might still feel something. You might still have a sense of the situation, but it's no longer clear what that sense is made of. It contains the initial response and everything that followed it. And now those are moving together. That's often described as confusion. But what's happening is that multiple things are present at once and experienced as one. Most people assume trust breaks in dramatic moments, a betrayal, a major mistake, a relationship ending, a decision that changes everything. And it certainly can. But often trust erodes much more quietly than that, in ordinary moments that never fully integrate. You notice exhaustion around someone, but continue the interaction because nothing objectively wrong happened. You agree to something before fully checking how you actually feel about it, and only realize later that your entire body has already tightened around the yes. You stay on the phone 20 minutes longer than you wanted because ending the conversation feels socially awkward. You answer an email immediately, even though part of you wanted to wait. You say, whatever works for everyone, while simultaneously feeling a small collapse somewhere internally. You volunteer automatically, laugh when uncomfortable, minimize your own fatigue, keep explaining long after your actual preference has already become clear inside you. Many of these moments happen so quickly they barely register consciously, especially for people who are highly relational, socially perceptive, or accustomed to soothing interactions automatically. The override often arrives dressed as politeness or flexibility or maturity or simply being easy to deal with. And because these moments appear small individually, they rarely seem significant while they're happening. But self-trust usually does not erode all at once. More often it changes through accumulation. Hundreds of moments where perception appeared briefly and was immediately reorganized around maintaining harmony, avoiding discomfort, preventing conflict, or keeping things moving smoothly. Over time, the nervous system begins learning something very particular. My first response is less important than managing the situation correctly. And after enough repetition, people often stop recognizing these moments as overrides at all. They simply experience themselves as tired, indecisive, disconnected, and chronically uncertain about what they actually want. And often the difficult part is not the original perception. Sensitive people frequently notice quite a lot. The difficult part is what happens afterwards. You notice something, you move past it, the situation unfolds, and then your attention shifts somewhere else before the experience fully connects back to what you noticed in the first place. And over time, that creates a very particular kind of instability, not because intuition is absent or because you're disconnected from yourself, but because the experience never fully reconnects. What happens if multiple truths are allowed to exist in the same room? One of the reasons this can be surprisingly difficult is that we're rarely observing our own lives from a distance. We're standing inside them, inside the hope, inside the fear, inside the consequences, inside the history. I've often thought that most of us move through life inside our own emotional weather systems, and weather affects visibility. When the sky is clear, we can see quite far. When fog rolls in, visibility changes. And this isn't because the landscape has disappeared, but because our perspective has changed. This is one of the reasons we're often able to see things clearly for other people. You can recognize your friend's exhaustion. You can see a situation isn't sustainable. You can see that a relationship has changed. You can see that someone is carrying more than they can comfortably hold. And then we turn towards our own lives and everything becomes much less obvious. We're not foolish. And it's not because we've lost touch with ourselves. It's not because our intuition has stopped working, but because we're standing inside the weather. When you're looking at your friend's life, you're not carrying her fears. You're not carrying her history. You're not carrying the story she's been telling herself about who she is. You're not carrying her hopes for how things might turn out. You can see the landscape. She's standing inside it. And the same thing is true in our own lives. When we're making decisions about work, relationships, health, creativity, family, or change, we're not observing from a mountaintop. We're standing in the middle of the experience. We're carrying our hopes, our fears, our responsibilities, our grief, our memories, the identities we've spent years building, the futures we've spent years imagining. And I think many people become unnecessarily hard on themselves here. They assume uncertainty means they should know better. They assume conflict means they've lost touch with themselves. They assume that if they were truly intuitive, truly self-aware, truly healed, the answer would already be obvious. But I don't think that's how human beings work. Intuition doesn't remove participation. It doesn't remove consequence. It doesn't remove grief. It doesn't remove love, and it doesn't remove complexity. You are standing inside your own life, which means there will be moments when more than one thing is true. Moments when you can see the path forward and still feel afraid. Moments when you know something needs to change and still feel sad about changing it. Moments when part of you is ready and another part needs time. Those moments are not evidence that you've lost yourself. They're evidence that you're human.